Somebody had a follow-up question about Matthew 24. There's parable there where two men are in the field, one will be taken, the other left. Two women will be grinding with a hand mill, one will be taken, the other left. Does that have anything to do with rapture and the end times?
Good question.
It's one of those texts, and Greg, I think, gave the key text in 1 Thessalonians 4 that kind of is sort of the center for sort of a biblical defense of the rapture theory. Once you make that move, though, it's very easy, as you're reading through the rest of the New Testament, to come to phrases or a verse that you can kind of pull out and go, oh, listen, two people, one's taken, one's left. Look, that's the kind of language Paul's using. The problem with that is although I think this turns up in actually not just Matthew, it turns up in Luke. Doesn't it turn up, I think, Mark?
I'll get to it by the year 2014.
Absolutely. Let me give you a sneak preview on that. I forget which one of the Gospels, but it's asked several times, and only in one of the Gospels is it recorded that when Jesus gave that teaching, his disciples immediately asked him, Lord, where are they taken? And he actually answers in one of the Gospel accounts. And he doesn't say, well, come on, dude, they're taken up to heaven to meet me. No, in fact, what Jesus says is, actually answers with a fairly cryptic response, and he says, where the body is, there will the vultures be gathered.
That's found in Matthew.
Okay, so wherever they're taken is not a good place, all right? Vultures represent in Scripture, at least in Genesis 15 onward, a common theme in Scripture of what happens to covenant breakers. It's a common theme that the covenant breaker must die and their feast will become food for the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. And so birds of the air, vultures, buzzards, these sorts of things in Scripture usually represent a negative occurrence for someone who's broken covenant with God or God's people. So Jesus' answer to where are they taken is not up to heaven to see me. It's to some place where covenant breakers go, or at least people who are going through really bad times. So in this case, you didn't want to be one of the ones taken. You wanted to be one of the ones left. It was a persecution text. But again, if you just have kind of rapture theology and you see that without any kind of like reading the next verse, it's very easy to misunderstand that verse.
It's interesting, too, that in all the gospel accounts, and here I think it's really important to understand apocalyptic imagery, which was always very superlative. It stated things in extreme terms. And in all of the Gospels, Jesus is answering the question, when shall these things happen? When will the temple be torn down? And he talks about it in end-of-the-world terms, but that was very typical for apocalyptic literature. The sun will turn dark, the moon will turn to blood, or vice versa, however it goes. Wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, whatever. Those were standard apocalyptic ways of saying the world as you know it is going to come to an end. And there's many scholars, and I might be venturing too far to say the majority of academic scholars, who argue that that is a reference, probably a reference to the cataclysm that would happen to the Jewish world in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed and the Jews were banished from Jerusalem, and the whole Judeo system up to that point came to an end. The world as they knew it came to an end. Now, I wouldn't make that a doctrine or something, but there's a lot of scholars who argue that that's probably what it's referring to. But it's interesting that the whole chapter is answering that question. It's in sync with when the temple is destroyed, that's also when all these other things are destroyed. And in that context, the one taken is the unfortunate one. In the persecution, they're taken, and that's where the vultures are.